In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to work with shared preferences within Flutter. This tutorial will work for whether you're developing a Flutter app for the mobile, desktop, or web. To learn about shared preferences, we're going to be building an application that will allow us to input our weight and height. And then for that weight and height, we are going to be able to calculate the BMI that we should have. Not only this, our application is going to persist all of the state using shared preferences on the device. So if for some reason we stop running our application, and we come back to it, then all of the data that we had inputted previously is going to be stored in the form of a history of all of the BMIs that we've calculated, but also the last input that the user had put in the weight and height input fields, those are also going to be stored. Before we get started, I'd just like to mention the link to all of the resources that I use within this video, as well as a link to the source code can be found in the video's description, so feel free to take a look at it. So let's talk about what shared preferences are. Well, shared preferences is a package that wraps the platform-specific persistent storage for storing simple data within your application. So if you just want to store simple data that pertains to the user within your application, then shared preferences is a good solution for that. But if you're somebody that's looking for a more beefy solution, that I recommend taking a look at Hive, which is a NoSQL blazing fast database that lives on the device that you can use instead of shared preferences. So if your use case is more complicated and maybe entails something more complicated than shared preferences, then Hive is an excellent solution, and I already have a tutorial for this on my channel, so you can click on it and actually watch it. So before we begin, let's actually import all of the packages that we need to begin our development. So I'm going to be using the shared preferences package, which is going to be allowing us to implement shared preferences within our application. So I'm going to come to PubSpec dependencies and then add shared preferences. And besides this, we're also going to be using another package, which is going to be called input_quantity, which is a cool package that allows us to create widgets of similar stature, which allow us to basically input into a text field a specific number that we can increase or decrease using these buttons. So this is the package that we're using to basically display the input fields for weight and height. So I'm going to be copying this, coming back to pubspec.yaml and then adding it. Once we have these dependencies added, you can do flutter pub get. Your IDE might do it automatically, or you can do it through the terminal. And once you have the packages installed, we can come to main. So within main, I just want to tell you that I have the home property set to a stateful widget, which is homepage, and our homepage is going to be responsible for rendering all of our application's UI as well as handling the logic. So before we begin coding, I'm just going to quickly start debugging my application, make sure that it works, and then I'll resume the video. So now that the application is running, the first thing I'm going to be doing is creating a variable which will store a reference to our shared preferences. And then I'm going to mark it as optional, and I'm going to call this _prefs. Once this is done, I am going to be creating or overriding the init state function for my homepage state class. And here, what I'm going to be doing after the superclass's init state function is called, that I'm going to be accessing the shared preferences package. Then I'm going to be calling the get instance function, and this is going to return a future, which is going to return a shared preferences object to us. So I'm going to add a then clause to it, and then once this future gets resolved, we are going to be getting a value, and then I'm basically going to be taking this value and I'm going to be calling set state, and I'm going to be setting our prefs equal to the value that gets passed to us, and then doing command save. Once this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is coming to my build function, and I'm going to be creating another function below this, which is going to be called build UI. And as the name suggests, this function is going to be responsible for building the UI of the page. Then for my scaffold, I'm going to set the body attribute to be equal to this function call. And then for this build UI function, firstly, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a check on if prefs are null. So if our preferences object is null, then we are going to return a center widget with a child, which is going to be a circular progress indicator. So our application is currently loading. We're getting access to the preferences, so hence no need to show the actual UI. And if this is not the case, then what we'll do is that we will return a safe area widget for now with a child, and the child in this case is going to be a column. Then I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F command save, and there we go. So now we're seeing the circular progress indicator, but as soon as I restart my application, you're going to see that now it's not showing it to us anymore. And the reason for that is because we now call the shared preferences get instance method, it resolves, and then we set our preferences equal to the value of the instance that we get. So now that we have access to our shared preferences, before we can work with them, let's actually create a little bit of the UI so that we can actually interact with shared preferences through that. So what are we going to be creating? Well, for now, what I'll do is that I'll come to the column, and then I'm going to define the children's list for it. I'll leave it empty for now, and before I add anything to the children's list, I'm going to be adding the main axis size, the main axis alignment, and the cross axis alignment for the column. Then after this, I'm going to be adding a container. This container is going to have a height and a width, which I'm going to copy and paste them in since they're very simple pieces of code. So the height is equal to 5% the height of the device. The width is the total width of the device. And then I'm going to have a child, which is going to be a center widget. The center widget will have a child, which will be a text. And this text is basically going to show us what our BMI was, or what our last most BMI calculation was. So for now, since it's nothing, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to say 0.00 BMI, and then this has to be within a string. So let me create a string and then do command save. And now we're seeing this. Then after this, I'm going to update the styling for this text by adding the following styling properties, and that's pretty much it. And once this is done, then after the container, I'm going to create a row. To that row, I'm going to have a children's list. For now, I'll keep that children's list empty. And before that, I'll define the main axis size, the main axis alignment, and the cross axis alignment for the row. Then for the children, what I'm going to do is that I will make a call to a function called weight input. And then I'm going to come below and I'm going to create a function for this called weight input. And then within this function, we'll be responsible for actually defining how our weight input is going to look. So our weight input is going to be fairly simple. It's going to be a column. Our column is going to have a children's list. The first child within our column is just going to be a simple text widget that shows the text weight. And then below this, we will actually use from the package input quantity, the widget input quantity. This expects us to give it some parameters, such as the maximum value that this can have. I'm going to set that to be $.infinity, so the maximum value can be infinity. The minimum value is going to be 0, since you can't have a negative weight. Then steps are in how much of an increment do we update our value when we click on the plus and minus, so in 1. And then after this, I'm going to define the callback function for when the quantity gets changed, what do I want to do? So well, for now, we don't want to do anything, so I'll just set this to be an empty function call. And then you can see that now we can see our weight being shown. We can also just click within this and type through our keyboard. So this also works. And if you want to use the actual buttons, you can increment it through that as well. Then what I'll do is that I'll copy this function. I'll paste it in again. And this time I'm going to say it's going to be height input. Then I'm going to say the text to be height. And then I'll do command save. Then I'll take this height input function, and after weight input within the same rows children, I'm going to add that. So now we can take input for the weight and height. So now if I restart my application, you're going to see that the weight and height get reset, and I don't want that. I want whatever the last input value here was to be persisted even when our app gets restarted. So let's work on that. So how are we going to be doing this? Well, firstly, what I'll do is that I'll come to the top of my class. I'm going to create a num type variable here, and this is going to be height, which I'm going to set to 0. And then besides this, I'm also going to set another variable called weight equal to 0, and then another variable that I'll create for now, which I'm going to call underscore BMI equal to 0, like so. Once this is done, I am going to come down to my weight input. I'm going to set the actual initial value for this input quantity to be whatever our weight was. And then for the height input, I'll do the same, which is underscore initial value equals to whatever our height is. And then do command save. Once this is done, then I'm going to come to the actual onQuantityChanged function for weight input. And here I'm going to do the following. Not only am I going to call setState and then set whatever our weight is to the value that gets passed to us, but after this, I'm going to access our preferences, and then I'm going to access a function on it called setBool. And whether you use setBool or setDouble or setInt or setString, the way shared preferences work is that you give it a key, and for that key, you define what value it's going to store. So setBool is going to take a key and it's going to store a bool for that key. In our case, since we want to store a number, I'm going to do setDouble, and then it expects a key. So in this case, what I'm going to do is that my key is going to be last input weight, like so. And then the value is going to be whatever our weight is, and then do command save. And it's giving me an error saying that the argument type num can't be assigned to a parameter type double. So for this, what we can do is that we can cast our weight to a double and do command save, and that should pretty much fix our problem. Then I'm going to copy the set state function. I'm going to come to height input to, again, the on quantity changed. I'll paste in the same block of code, but this time the key that we're going to store our height against is going to be last input height. And this time we are going to be, when set state is called, actually update the height variable to be value, and then do here the same as well. So height dot to double, to command save. So now when we update these weight property or weight, then this information should be stored within our shared preferences. But even still, if I restart my application, then this information is not being displayed to us or being persisted, or it appears that it's not being persisted. And the reason for that is because when we initialize the application, we are not getting the value for the last input height and weight from shared preferences. So to fix that, we will come to our init state function. And within set state, once we have access to our preferences, then what we're going to be doing is actually accessing our preferences and extracting the height and weight from that. So let's get the height first. For that, I'll do underscore prefs dot, and this time we're going to do get. And then for the double, we are going to give it a key. And the key in this case is going to be our last input height, like so. And then once we have this, then I'm going to basically show you guys what error we're getting. So it's saying that a optional double can't be assigned to a num. So to fix this, what I can do first is that I can cast this as a double. And if this value is null, then we can just replace it with a 0, or we can return a 0. Then what I'll do is that I am going to copy this line of code, paste it in again, and I'm going to say that we're going to be doing weight and prefs.get double. But this time, if you remember, we saved weight under the key last input weight, and then it's the same 200 to command save. So now if I restart my application, you're going to see that the weight and height are now being displayed for whatever the latest updated value for them was being stored in shared preferences. So now if I update the weight, it's going to be 6. And if I restart my application, you're seeing that it's still displaying 6 and 4.2 to us. So now that this is done, what I want to do is that I want to have a button that can allow me to calculate the BMI and display that BMI here for whatever the latest BMI calculation was, as well as the list of all of the BMIs that we've calculated. So let's do that. Well, to do that, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is coming to my build UI. And then after my row, I'm going to be calling a function, which I'm going to call calculate BMI button. And then I'm going to come to the bottom of my class after height input. And here I'm going to create a function which will return a widget underscore calculate BMI button, like so. And then within this is where we're going to be defining how our button should look. So for our button, it's going to be very simple. What I'm going to be doing is that I will return a padding widget. This padding widget is going to have some padding. And then after that, we are going to have a child for this padding widget. So what is the child going to be? Well, the child will be a material button. And then it will have an onPress callback, which for now is going to be empty. Once this is done, I'm also going to define the background color for this button, which is going to be colors.purple, and do command save. And then finally, I'm going to define the child for this button, which is going to be a text with some styling applied to it, which says calculate. So once we actually call this or press on this button, then what I want to do is that I want to basically calculate the BMI. So the formula for BMI is that you basically take the weight, and let me set a variable name for this variable called calculated BMI. And I'm going to say that we're going to take the weight and we're going to divide that by the power, which basically is a mathematical operator where it's going to raise whatever variable we pass in the first argument, which in this case is going to be height, to whatever the second argument is. So since I want to do height squared, I am going to do power height and then as the second argument 2. So this means height squared. And then we need to import this from .math. And then we are going to be storing this information within calculated BMI. Once we've calculated the BMI, I'm going to call set state, and then we're going to be doing something within this. But for now, let's just restart our application and print calculated BMI to the console when we click on calculate. So when I do that, you're seeing that it's inputting calculated BMI here as 0.34. So now what I'm going to be doing is removing this print statement. And then now we need a list in which we're going to be storing this information. So let's do that first. So to do that, what I'll do is that I'll let you guys know that for now, shared preferences only support storing one type of list, and those are lists of strings. So somehow we'll need to convert our BMIs to strings, and I'll show you how to do it. But before that, let's just actually define how our list is. So I'm going to say that we're going to have a list of string. This is going to be called underscore BMI history. And I'm going to be setting this equal to an empty list, like so. Then once this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be coming to my calculate BMI button, and then I'm basically going to be coming to set state. Within set state, I'm going to be doing BMI history dot add, and then here I'm going to be adding the value to this list. So we want to take our calculated BMI, but we can't add that since that's a double. So what we are going to be doing is that we're going to be calling the toString as fixed function, and this will basically return us a string with the fraction digits that we want. In this case, I would limit my double to 2 fraction digits and then do command save. And now this should be added to our BMI history. Once this is done, the last thing I want to do is I want to take this BMI history and I want to share this within my shared preferences. So for that, I'll do underscore prefs dot, and I'm going to do set, and there's the function called string list. Similar to how we've done before, we need to give it a key under which we're going to save this list, which in this case is going to be BMI history, and then the actual list, which is BMI history, and do command save. So now that this is done, what I want to do is that when we actually call set state and we've added BMI history, I want to show that BMI here. So how do we do that? Well, for that, firstly, we need to go to the actual place where we are actually showing this text, which in this case is in our column, and then the container which shows the BMI. And here what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be changing the logic just a bit. Instead of 0.00, I'm going to be interpolating a value within here, which is going to be BMI history. And since our list can be null, what I'm going to do is use the last or null call. So it's either going to return the last element to us or null. And in the case we get null, then I'll return just 0.00 and do command save. So now we're getting 0.00, but as soon as I calculate, now it's showing me 0.34 as the BMI. And if I make it something realistic, such as, let's just say 75 kilos, and then the height in this case needs to be in meters. So let's just do 182 meters to calculate. So now the last thing I want to do is that once we've calculated these BMIs, I want to list this BMI history onto the screen. So for that, let's create a function that's going to be responsible for actually rendering this history. So I'm going to create a function within my class which will return a widget. I'm going to call it BMI history list. And then I'm going to open up the function body. Within this, I will say that we will return an expanded widget. And this expanded widget will have a child. The child will be a list view dot builder. Then we're going to have an item builder, which will be a function that takes in a context and an integer, which is going to be the index. And then it defines how we are going to render each of the children within our list. And then I'm going to add the remaining commas here to command save. And then I'm also going to, for the list, define the item count, which is going to be our BMI history dot length. So how many entries we have, that's how many tiles we want to show. Then within our item builder, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be returning a list tile. And this list tile is going to have a title, which is going to be our text. And this text is going to be the BMI history and then the index. And then I'm going to do command save. Then I'll take this BMI history list. I am going to come to the main build UI function, BMI, or after our calculate BMI button actually, what I'm going to be doing is adding this function to command save. And now we can see all of the BMIs that we've added. So this list is quite extensive. So what I want to do is have the ability to actually click on one of these and delete them. So let's also take a look at that. So to do this, what I'm going to be doing is coming back to my BMI history list. Then before I actually implement the logic for deleting, I'm going to be implementing the leading widget for this list tile, which will just show us the index. Now that we're displaying the indexes, the last thing I want to do is somehow implement the logic so that when we long press on these, it deletes the specific entry from the list and then updates shared preferences. So to do that, what I'm going to be doing is actually coming after the title and defining the on long press callback function. And within this, what I'll basically do is that I'll say BMI history.remove, and we're going to remove the value at the specific index. And it's not going to be remove, it's actually going to be remove at, and then do command save. And then after this, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to call set state. And I forgot to mention that what we actually need to do is call the BMI history.remove here, like so. And once this is done, then I'm going to do the same thing that we've done before, where I'll take my preferences object and I'm going to say that we're going to set the string list. We're going to give it a key. The key should be the same since we want to update the BMI history, and that's going to be BMI history, and then do command save. And now if I long press on one of these, and I'll also like to mention that we need to use the remove at function. So I will use remove at, restart my application, 78, 5.83 to calculate. And you can see that we're seeing 2.29. If I hold them, it deletes it. And then now I can update the weight a bit, update the height to calculate, add some more weight, calculate. And then I can delete these, and you can see that it's working as intended. So now the last thing that I want to do is that when we restart our application, actually show from shared preferences what our BMI history was. So this is going to be very simple. All we're going to be doing is coming to our init state. And then once we have access to our preferences, I'm going to take our BMI history and I'm going to set that equal to prefs.get string list. And then we need to give it key, which is going to be underscore BMI history. And then do this. And then if in this case it's null, then we'll just give it an empty list. To command save. And now if I restart my application, we should see what our most recent calculated BMIs were. So with that, that's pretty much it for today's tutorial. If you enjoyed it, then please don't forget to leave a like on the video as well as subscribe to my channel so that you get notified every time I release a new video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them down in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer them for you. And if you're interested in learning a bit more about Flutter, then take a look at this video that I've released on learning Hive and this video that I released on actually building a weather app within Flutter. And with that, bye-bye.